Good evening. You're listening to 94.1 KPFA Berkeley, 89.3 KPFB Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF Fresno, 97.5 K248 BR Santa Cruz, and online at kpfa.org. The time is 9 p.m. Stay tuned for Suspense.
Tonight, we take pleasure in bringing you Suspense, a weekly anthology of notable melodramas from stage and screen, fiction and radio, presented each week to bring you to the edge of your chair, to keep you in suspense.
It was on a warm evening at the end of June that I was summoned to the home of Halpin Chalmers, a noted author and journalist of my acquaintance. Upon arriving at his apartment above the jewelry store of Smithwick and Isaacs on Central Square, I found Chalmers in his study, sitting by the window. 2 tall candles guttered at his elbow and cast a sickly amber light over his long nose and slightly receding chin. For Chalmers would have nothing modern about his apartment. He had the soul of a medieval ascetic. He preferred illuminated manuscripts to automobiles, leering stone gargoyles to radios and adding machines.
I'm glad you came, Frank.
Given the gravity of your summons, I had little choice. I see you've brought that strange little library of yours with you. Plotinus, Emmanuel Moscopulus, St. Thomas Aquinas.
Indeed.
Oh, these are new, though. Mixed in with the medieval pamphlets on witchcraft, mathematical formulae? Einstein and John Dee are strange bedfellows.
Cigarette?
Thanks, but no.
We are just discovering now that the old alchemists and sorcerers were 2/3 right, and that your modern biologist and materialist is 9/10 wrong.
You have always scoffed at modern science.
Only at scientific dogmatism. I've always been a rebel, a champion of originality and lost causes. That is why I have chosen to repudiate the conclusions of contemporary biologists.
But what of Einstein?
A priest of transcendental mathematics, a profound mystic and explorer of the great suspected.
Then you do not entirely despise science.
No, of course not. I merely distrust the scientific positivism of the past 50 years. Positivism of Haeckel and Darwin and of Mr. Bertrand Russell. I believe that biology has failed pitifully to explain the mystery of man's origin and destiny.
Give them time.
My friend, your pun is sublime. Give them time. Is precisely what I would do. Your modern biologist scoffs at time. He has the key, but he refuses to use it. What do we know of time, really? Einstein believes that it is relative, that it can be interpreted in terms of space, of curved space. But must we stop there? Mathematics fail us. Can we not advance by insight?
You are treading on dangerous ground. That is a pitfall that your true investigator avoids. That is why modern science has advanced so slowly. It accepts nothing that it cannot demonstrate. But you...
I would take hashish, opium, all manner of drugs. I would emulate the sages of the East, and then perhaps I would apprehend...
What?
The fourth dimension.
Theosophical rubbish.
Perhaps. I believe that drugs expand human consciousness. James agreed with me, and I have discovered a new one.
A new drug?
It was used centuries ago by Chinese alchemists, but it is virtually unknown in the West. Its occult properties are amazing. With its aid, and the aid of my mathematical knowledge, I believe that I can go back through time.
I don't follow.
Time is merely our imperfect perception of a new dimension of space. Time and motion are both illusions. Everything that has existed from the beginning of the world exists now. Events that occurred centuries ago on this planet continue to exist in another dimension of space. Events that will occur centuries from now exist already. We cannot perceive their existence because we cannot enter the dimension of space that contains them. Human beings as we know them are merely fractions, infinitesimally small fractions of one enormous whole.
I think I understand.
It will be sufficient for my purpose if you can form a vague idea of what I wish to achieve. I wish to strip from my eyes the veils of illusion that time has thrown over them, and see the beginning and the end.
And you think this new drug will help you?
I'm sure that it will. I want you to help me. I intend to take the drug immediately. I cannot wait. I must see. I am going back through time. I have here 5 pellets of the drug Liao. It was used by the Chinese philosopher Lao Tse, and while under its influence, he envisioned Tao. It was the most mysterious force in the world. It rounds and pervades all things. It contains the visible universe and everything that we call reality. He who apprehends the mysteries of Tao, clearly all that was and will be.
Ish.
Resembles a great animal, recumbent, motionless, containing in its enormous body all the worlds of our universe, the past, the present, and the future. See portions of this great monster through a slit, which we call time. With the aid of this drug, I shall enlarge the slit. I shall behold the great figure of life, the recumbent beast in its entirety.
What do you wish me to do?
My friend, watch and take notes. And if you go back too far, you must recall me to reality. You can recall me by shaking me violently. If I appear to be suffering acute physical pain, you call me at once.
I wish you wouldn't make this experiment. You are taking dreadful risks. I don't believe that there is any 4th dimension, and I emphatically do not believe in Tao. And I don't approve of your experimenting with unknown drugs.
I know the properties of this drug. I know precisely how it affects the human animal, and I know its dangers. The risk does not reside in the drug itself. My only fear is that I may become lost in time. I shall assist the drug. Before I swallow this pellet, I shall give my undivided attention to the geometric and algebraic symbols that I have traced on this paper. Prepare my mind for an excursion into time. I shall approach the 4th dimension with my conscious mind before I take the drug, which will enable me to exercise occult powers of perception. Conscious approach to an actual apprehension of the 4th dimension of time will supplement the work of the drug. The drug will open up stupendous new vistas. The mathematical preparation will enable me to grasp them intellectually. I can grasp the 4th dimension in dreams, emotionally, intuitively. But I have never been able to recall in waking life the occult splendors that were momentarily revealed to me. But with grade, I believe that I can recall them. You will take down everything that I say under the influence of the drug. No matter how strange or incoherent my speech may become, you will omit nothing. When I wake, I may be able to supply the key to whatever is mysterious or incredible. I'm not sure that I shall succeed, but if I do succeed, time will exist for me no longer. Please, stand over there by the window and watch. Have you a fountain pen and a pad, Frank?
I do. Chalmers, I emphatically disapprove of this experiment. You are taking a frightful risk.
Don't be an asinine old woman. Nothing that you can say will induce me to stop now. Now I entreat you to remain silent while I take the pill and study these charts. It's beginning to get dark. Write that. It's beginning to get dark, and the familiar objects in the room are fading out. I can discern them vaguely through my eyelids, but they're fading swiftly. I'm leaving the room. The walls are vanishing, and I can no longer see any of the familiar objects. I think that I'm about to make a great leap. A leap through space. Or perhaps it is through time that I shall make the leap. Everything is dark, indistinct. God in heaven, I see!
Chalmers! Chalmers, shall I wake you?
Do not! I see everything. All of the billions of lives that preceded me on this planet are before me at this moment. I see men of all ages, all races, all colors. They're fighting, killing, building, dancing, singing. They're sitting about rude fires on lonely gray deserts and flying through the air in monoplanes. They're riding the seas in bark canoes and enormous steamships. They're painting bison and mammoth on the walls of dismal caves and covering huge canvases with queer futuristic designs. I watch the migrations from Atlantis, from Lemuria. I see the elder races, Neanderthalers with lowered heads and bent knees, ranging obscenely across Europe. I watch the Achaeans streaming into the Greek islands, and the crude beginnings of the Hellenic culture. I am in Athens, and Pericles is young. I'm standing on the soil of Italy. A thousand naked slaves grovel before me as I pass in a litter of gold and ivory, and the flower girls scream, "Ave Caesar," as I nod and smile. I am myself a slave on a Moorish galley. I walk in the holiest sanctuaries. I enter the temples of Venus. I kneel in adoration before the Magna Mater, and I throw coins on the bare knees of the sacred courtesans who sit with veiled faces in the groves of Babylon. I am a priest of Isis, and my magic astounds the nations. I perceive everything simultaneously. I perceive everything from all sides. I am a part of all the teeming billions about me. I exist in all men, and all men exist in me. I perceive the whole of human history in a single instant, the past and the present. By simply straining, I can see farther and farther back. Now I'm going back through strange curves and angles. Angles and curves multiply about me. I perceive great segments of time through the curves. There is curved time and angular time. The beings that exist in angular time cannot enter curved time. It is very strange. I'm going back and back. Man has disappeared from the earth. Gigantic reptiles crouch beneath enormous palms and swim through the loathly black waters of dismal lakes. Now the reptiles have disappeared. No animals remain upon the land. But beneath the waters, plainly visible to me, dark forms move slowly over the rotting vegetation. These forms are becoming simpler and simpler. Now they are single cells. All about me there are angles, strange angles that have no counterparts on the earth. I'm desperately afraid. There is an abyss of being which man has never fathomed. I'm passing through unearthly angles. I am approaching the burning horror of it.
Chalmers, do you wish me to interfere?
Not yet. I will go on. I will see what lies beyond life. There are things I cannot distinguish. They move slowly through angles. They have no bodies, and I think they have scented me. They are slowly turning toward me.
Chalmers, stop it. Do you hear? Chalmers, you must stop that. There is nothing in this room that can harm you. Do you understand? Do you understand?
Whiskey. You'll find a flask in the cabinet by the window, upper left-hand drawer. They nearly got me.
That drug was the very devil.
It wasn't a drug. They scented me in time. I went too far.
What were they like?
No words in our language can describe them. They are symbolized vaguely in the myth of the fall, and in an obscene form which is occasionally found engraved in ancient tablets. The Greeks had a name for them, which veiled their essential foulness. The tree, the snake, and the apple, these are the vague symbols of a most awful mystery. Frank, a terrible and unspeakable deed was done in the beginning, before time, the deed, and from the deed, the seeds of the deed move through angles in dim recesses of time.
Chalmers, we are living in the 3rd decade of the 20th century.
They are lean and athirst, the hounds of Tyndalos.
Shall I call a physician?
A physician cannot help me now. They are horrors of the soul, and yet, they are real, Frank. I saw them for a ghastly moment. For a moment, I stood on the other side. I stood on the pale gray shores beyond time and space, in an awful light that was not light. All the evil in the universe was concentrated in their lean, hungry bodies. Oh, had they bodies? I saw them only for a moment. I cannot be certain, but I heard them breathe. Indescribably for a moment I felt their breath upon my face. They turned toward me and I fled screaming. In a single moment I fled screaming through time. I fled down quintillions of years. But they scented me. Men awake in them cosmic hungers. But do not imagine that they are literally prosaically evil. They are beyond good and evil as we know it. They are that which in the beginning fell away from cleanliness. Through the deed they became bodies of death, receptacles of all foulness. They are not evil in our sense because in the spheres through which they move there is no thought, no morals, no right or wrong as we understand it. There is merely the pure and the foul. The foul expresses itself through angles, the pure through curves. Man, the pure part of him, is descended from a curve. Do not laugh. I mean that literally.
I'm dreadfully sorry for you, Chalmers. But I don't intend to stay and listen to such gibberish. I'll send my physician to see you. He's an elderly, kindly chap, and he won't be offended if you tell him to go to the devil. But I hope you'll respect his advice. A week's rest in a good sanitarium should benefit you immeasurably. When Chalmers phoned the following morning, my first impulse was to hang up the receiver immediately, for his request was so unusual, and his voice so wildly hysterical that I feared any further association with him would result in the impairment of my own sanity. But I could not doubt the genuineness of his misery, and when he broke down completely and I heard him sobbing over the wire, I decided to comply with his request. And so I went to Chalmers' apartment, stopping en route to purchase 20 pounds of plaster of Paris.
The plaster of Paris. Give it to me.
What the devil? All the furniture, the books. Everything gone. What did you do with everything?
It is just conceivable that we can thwart them, but we must work rapidly. Frank, there is a step-ladder in the hall. Bring it here immediately, and then fetch a pail of water.
What for?
To mix the plaster, you fool. To mix the plaster that will save our bodies and souls from a contamination unmentionable. To mix the plaster that will save the world from... Oh, Frank, they must be kept out.
Who?
The hounds of Tyndalos. They can only reach us through angles. We must eliminate all the angles from this room. I shall plaster up all the corners, all of the crevices. We must make this room resemble the interior of a sphere.
All right, Chalmers. I'll help you. That's all of them. Every angle in the room has been plastered over. Are you satisfied now?
I shall remain in this room until they return in time. When they discover that the scent leads through the curves, they will return. They will return ravenous and snarling and unsatisfied to the foulness that was in the beginning, before time, before space. It was good of you to help.
Will you not see a physician now, Chalmers?
Perhaps. Tomorrow, but for now, I must wait and watch.
Wait for what?
I know that you think me insane. You have a shrewd but prosaic mind, and you cannot conceive of an entity that does not depend for its existence on force and matter. But did it ever occur to you, my friend, that force and matter are merely the barriers to perception imposed by time and space? When one knows, as I do, that time and space are identical and that they are both deceptive because they are merely imperfect manifestations of a higher reality, one no longer seeks in the visible world for an explanation of the mystery and terror of being.
Goodbye, Chalmers.
Forgive me. I did not mean to offend you. You have a superlative intellect, but I have a superhuman one. It is only natural that I should be aware of your limitations.
Phone if you need me. I'll send my physician over at once. He's a hopeless maniac. And heaven knows what will happen to him if someone doesn't take charge of him immediately. A fortnight later, a most unexpected event took place in Partridgeville as chronicled in the local newspaper. At 2 o'clock this morning, an earth tremor of unusual severity broke several plate glass windows in Central Square and completely disorganized the electric and street railway systems. The tremor was felt in the outlying districts, and the steeple of the First Baptist Church on Angel Hill, designed by Christopher Wren in 1717, was entirely demolished. It was, however, a far less publicized event that brought me to the office of Detective Sergeant Douglas. Detective Sergeant Douglas?
You must be Mr. Long. Please, have a seat. You know a writer of occult works named Halpin Chalmers, don't you?
Yes. We've been friends for over a decade. Why?
Because, I'm afraid, Mr. Chalmers is dead.
What happened? Do you suspect foul play?
Foul play? Of that, there is no doubt. But like nothing I've ever seen or even heard of. At 7 o'clock yesterday morning, Mr. L.E. Hancock, who occupies the apartment opposite Chalmers' room, smelt a peculiar odor in the hallway when he opened his door to take in his cat. The odor he describes as extremely acrid and nauseous, and he affirms that it was so strong in the vicinity of Chalmers' room that he was obliged to hold his nose when he approached that section of the hall. Hancock decided to investigate. When repeated tappings on Chalmers' door brought no response, he notified the superintendent. The latter opened the door by means of a passkey, and the two men quickly made their way into Chalmers' room. The room was utterly destitute of furniture, and Hancock asserts that when he first glanced on the floor, his heart went cold within him, and that the superintendent, without saying a word, walked to the open window and stared at the building opposite for fully 5 minutes. Chalmers was stretched upon his back in the center of the room. He was nude, and his chest and arms were covered with a peculiar bluish pus or ichor. His head lay upon his chest. It had been completely severed from his body, and the features were twisted, torn, horribly mangled. There was no trace of blood. As for the room, the intersections of the walls, ceiling, and floor had been thickly smeared with plaster of Paris. But at intervals, fragments had cracked and fallen off. Someone had grouped these upon the floor about Chalmers so as to form a perfect triangle. And then there were these. Several sheets of yellow paper, badly charred and covered with geometric designs, symbols, and hastily scrawled notes. The notes are nearly illegible and so absurd in content that they would appear to furnish no possible clue to the perpetrator of the crime.
Could I see them? Maybe I could help.
Be my guest. That one was closest to Chalmers' body. Note how it's even more badly charred than the others.
So I see.
We couldn't read much. Do you think you can make heads or tails of it?
It's terribly burned and scrawled, but I think so. Good God. The plaster is falling. A terrific shock has loosened the plaster. An earthquake, perhaps. I never could have anticipated this. It is growing dark in the room. I must phone Frank. But can he get here in time? I will try.
It was that reference, compared with his telephone records for the past few weeks, that led me to ring you up.
Yes, doubtless it was me he was referring to. I will recite the Einstein formula. I will. Oh God, they are breaking through. They are breaking through. Smoke is pouring from the corners of the wall. Their tongues... It ends there.
These notes read like the ravings of a madman, only none of this makes any sense. Man murdered in a room that had both door and window locked from the inside. Chalmers was decapitated, but that doesn't appear to have been the cause of death. Rather, I think it was poisoning by the strange blue slime with which his upper body was covered. And that slime, it might be the strangest thing of all. I sent some of that slime to the Partridgeville Chemical Laboratories and asked them to do an analysis post-haste. This is what I just got back in response. Report of James Morton, chemist and bacteriologist. Dear Mr. Douglas, the fluid you sent me for analysis is the most peculiar that I have ever examined. It resembles living protoplasm, but it lacks the peculiar substance known as enzymes. Enzymes catalyze the chemical reactions occurring in living cells, and when the cell dies, it causes them to disintegrate via hydrolyzation. Without enzymes, protoplasm should possess enduring vitality, i.e., immortality. Enzymes are the negative components, so to speak, of unicellular organism, which is the basis for all life. That living matter can exist without enzymes, biologists emphatically deny. And yet, the substance that you have sent me is alive, but it lacks these indispensable bodies. Good God, sir, do you realize what astounding new vistas this opens up?
I might. But you'd think me even madder than Chalmers. But I can tell you this much. Since I last saw Chalmers, I've been studying his most recent book, The Secret Watcher. In it, there is one particular passage. What if, parallel to the life we know, there is another life that does not die, which lacks the elements that destroy our life? It moves through strange curves and outrageous angles. In dreams I have seen it. I have stood on the dim shore beyond time and matter and seen it. Someday I shall travel in time and meet it face to face.
What are you saying?
Nothing. Except maybe he did. Maybe he did.
So ends The Hounds of Tyndalos by John C. Alzadek and Dana Perry Hayes. Tonight's story of Suspense. Suspense is produced by Blue Hours Productions. Tonight's radio drama was adapted by John C. Alzadek and Dana Perry Hayes from the short story by Frank Belknap Long. Daamen Krall was Halpin Chalmers, Christopher Duva was Frank, and Rocky Serta was Detective Sergeant Douglas. I'm Daamen Krall. Next week at this time, tune in again for another study in Suspense.
What's your rent situation? How about your house payments? Maybe the digital explosion is sweet for you, but it has certainly brought a grim outlook for many of us. Wondering if an area can lose its soul, KPFA is presenting an illuminating public event, The Dark Shadow of Tech, on the SF Bay Area. Carrie McClellan, author of Silicon City, San Francisco, and the Long Shadow of the Valley, will discuss it all with Richard A. Walker, author of Pictures of a Gone City, Tech and the Dark Side of Prosperity in the SF Bay Area. They'll be hosted by KPFA's Sasha Lilly, a deeply knowledgeable author and editor herself. This happens Thursday evening, October